Welcome back to Vancouver Carpenter. So today we're going to cover everything you need to know to order and install your cabinet doors. So let's say you've got some crusty old cabinets, the boxes are in decent shape, but you want to replace the doors. Well, I'm going to tell you how to do that in this video. So the first thing you're going to need to do is run around your kitchen and measure all your doors, and you need exactly accurate measurements. Now you might be thinking, why don't I just go to IKEA and get new cabinets? If you have standard size cabinets or old IKEA cabinets, that might work. But with our cabinets, these were all custom sizes and I couldn't find any matches anywhere. So we had to get all custom doors. I chose to use a simple painted MDF with a melamine back. It's a pretty affordable option, but it looks really good right away. So again, get a very accurate list of all your measurements and group all the like sizes together. Once you have that, you're going to be able to send a list out to a cabinet door shop. So something not a lot of people know is that even cabinet guys often don't make their own doors. They often sub out the doors to a cabinet door shop. So I just did a quick Google search. J&S Cabinet Doors was the first one that came up. It's just a place out in Surrey, BC. I'd never used J&S before, but I figured if they can't do a simple painted white MDF door, then they shouldn't be in the cabinet door business. So I sent them off my list. I had in mind what I figured a price should be. It came in a little under what I was willing to pay, so I decided to go with them. I didn't even send out a price anywhere else. Now there's one thing you need to know if you're sizing a corner cabinet. So my old corner cabinets had an overlap, but take a look at our new kitchen. You can see how the corner cabinets go is the corners just barely touch, but none of them overlap. So that's going to be how you're going to have to order them, measure and order them, in order to be able to use the systems that I'm putting out in these series of videos. Okay, but once you got your doors ordered and you've gone and picked them up, next it's time to install them. So I chose to install all the doors but two so that I get my system down before showing you guys what to do. So that system is as follows.
Well, I'm getting there, you guys. Got them all done except for these big two. So yeah, first thing, take them off. There's a little clip back here on most cabinets. If it's new enough, it'll have a clip. If it's really old, it's gonna have a little screw you have to actually undo, which is pretty annoying. But once you undo the screw, you can just slide them right out. But yeah, these ones are the clip ones, which is nice. So here's the clip. It's just this little guy, right? You just pull that and it releases it right there. All right, the next thing you're gonna wanna do is make sure you have a nice, clean surface that isn't going to scratch your cabinets. So I'm laying it face down, the new cabinet door. These are big ones, so I'm only going to be able to do one at a time on this little station. For all the other ones I was able to do two at a time, but for this video we only need to see one. Okay, next thing I'm doing is pulling all the hardware off the old doors and putting it aside. And this one has a weird screw thing. So this one has these really short little screws that has an almost machine thread. And you can see it threads into these plastic things. And I couldn't get these out and I didn't want to re-drill for them and install them. So I ended up buying a pack of number 6 5/8 screws, which are really close to this. They have a number 1 Robertson head and they're very close in size to this with a little bit very slightly more aggressive wood thread instead of the almost machine thread as the other ones. I would not dare go bigger than a 5/8 screw. So on 5/8 material, this is 5/8 melamine, you can see that screw is getting really close to going through. On the doors that I'm doing, these are 3/4 MDF. Now I tried using a 3/4 inch screw, but when I shone a light down the edge of the door, I could see just the tiniest little mounds, like so slight I couldn't see it when it was installed in the kitchen. But a 3/4 inch screw on 3/4 inch material, including, you know, that 1/8 from the hinge plate, it's still too close. So whatever thickness your door is, so if it's 5/8 thickness, maybe use a 1/2 inch screw. You can always test a 5/8 screw to see if you can actually see it. Just shine a glancing light down it and look for a little lump. I could see it. Nobody else would have ever noticed it, but I knew it's there and I knew it wasn't good enough. So for the 3/4 doors, I'm using 5/8 screws. The next thing I do is I line the doors up back to back. You really want to make sure you have the right door because you only get one shot on these. You drill them in the wrong place, those big plastic inserts you can use to plug those, not a good look. And if you only drill it off by like a 1/4 inch, sometimes you can't even fix it. I have this almost flushed up. The reason is the old doors are actually about 2 mils, maybe 1.5 mils wider than the new doors. So I've split the difference on each side. Now what I'm doing is I'm actually eyeballing the exact center of this with right here. And there are other ways to do this, but this is how I'm getting the most accurate results. Some people don't have a good eyeball and this isn't gonna work. You're gonna need to measure it. So really quickly, let's get into the measuring. All right, so these are just under 3 3/4 to the center of these. If I measure the other side, that one is 3 3/4. So I have a little bit of discrepancy. So my first 2 doors, I used this Craig hinge jig thingy that I've been using for all of them, but I set it all for 3 3/4. Now what I found was I was struggling to put some of the doors back on because there was a little bit of variance in whether these were 3 3/4 or 3 11/16. So if I did 3 3/4 on both of them, just going automatic by using the little numbers on the Craig jig, what was happening was the hinges were actually a little bit too far apart or close together, depending on what it was. So by eyeballing the center of these and marking which door it is, that way I was able to get a perfect fit. Once I started doing that, every single door started just sliding into place really easily because I was going on what the holes on the door actually are instead of what I think it should be based on the factory 3 3/4, which varied a little bit. So any tool that I think is useful for this job, I'm gonna link in the description below. I would absolutely never do this again without this. You guys will see in a little bit, but I've done kitchens by just buying a 35 mil Forstner bit, boring out the hinges and measuring and marking every one. I've gotten it done, but this was so much faster, so dummy proof. This is a really high quality bit. Like the Milwaukee Forstner bit that I bought for doing this burnt out after like 4 or 5 holes, and then you're just spending the whole time smelling burning MDF. You'll get it done, but it's not a nice job. This thing is really high quality. I'm super impressed with it so far. Okay, but getting back to this, so notice that we have a 3 on this one. So I'm gonna write a very small 3 on the back, the melamine side of that we can easily wipe off later. I am now going to line this up with the edge right here. Not sure how much you guys can see. I'm gonna clamp this side right here. And now we're gonna get ready to start drilling these out. But first let's go over this tool real quick. So there's a couple things you're gonna need to figure out, and this thing has the marks and adjustments for it. So one of them is how thick is this part right here. So that is determined by these little dials right here. You'll see it's got a bunch of numbers. I have it set on 4 because that's the one that matched it. The first one I drilled out was maybe on 3, and it gave me a very small line right there, which didn't match up with the existing ones. The existing ones were a little bigger. So the 4 worked out well on these. The next thing you need to figure out, so this is the 3 3/4 that I've been talking about, right? So it's 3 3/4 to the center of these. Now this thing does have some marks so that you can get it in the same place every time. However, if you're doing a and you might find out the same way I did that the notches on this are not exactly the same as what came from the factory on the original cabinets. So you can see I marked the 3 3/4 mark on there. I don't actually recommend doing that. If you do it really gently with like a white marker, but that just made it harder to see those lines. If you're doing all new doors, you can easily line it up with one of those marks. That's now going to give me the 3 3/4. But whenever I marked the actual cabinet, it usually wound up right about there. So I started going with the center line of the mark that I made. I also want you to take note of this little notch right in there. See that little notch? That's what we're going to be using to line up the line. I highly recommend drilling out a few test holes on the old doors before you start on the new doors. So we're just going to put this down here, and when we slide it up to there, and now I'm eyeballing the little line that I made that is the exact center of the old ones with that little notch right there. You can see that right there. I'm now going to very carefully clamp these down, making sure that my clamps are very flat. This is a little bit tight. And always keep an eye on my line. So if your clamps aren't flat when you clamp them, it can move it. You want to make sure that it's tight to this thing. Before I do every door, when I'm standing there, I reach under with my thumbnail and I check to see if I can fit my thumbnail in there. If I can fit my thumbnail in any of these, then it's not snug. So I'm not actually sitting on the ground, and I guess it's not my thumbnail, but I just really quickly check like this. I just wanted you guys to see it from down below. And now that we are all set, and hopefully this thing is where it should be, let's take another quick look at this thing to make sure it's where it should be. Part of the reason this thing is such a pleasure to use is because it's almost dummy-proof setup. So you can see there's this little collar, so if you actually wanted to drill it deeper, it's stuck in there. You could actually move this collar. Let's see if we can get that loose enough to move it. So you see like that? I don't think you necessarily want to or need to. It's got a notch in here, and that notch tells me that it's actually supposed to stay exactly right here all the time for all hinges. So it works perfectly on both 5/8 and 3/4 doors. And the reason is the hinge is the same for both doors. So I'm making sure that's really tight. I'm guessing the only reason you can unattach this is probably just to replace the bit if you wanted to buy a new bit. So next I'm chucking my drill onto here. Get it nice and snug. Now there is a little bit of lateral movement here. So like I can move it a little bit. So, you know, you got a mil or two of play there. But anyways, I'm just gonna start drilling now. Get it right on there and just go, push, drill. And unfortunately, I do find I have to take it off every single time. You'll see in a minute why. Okay, when popping off your clamps, I know this seems like micromanaging you guys, but when popping off your clamps, just really quickly release it. And then that way there's only a couple millimeters of slack there, and every time you can put it back on really fast and really easy. Save yourself a lot of time. It took me half of the kitchen to figure that out. Next, I'm going to vacuum it out. Nice and clean. It's now time for me to set up the next one. Again, I just eyeball that mark I made. I'm telling you guys, if you're good at eyeballing stuff, this is the more accurate way to do it. If you're not, oh well. Don't know what to tell you. Got to train that eye. You only train it by using it. Again, double checking right there for that there's no gap for my fingernail. Chuck it on. I do wish that I didn't have to do this every time, but it just seems so much easier to set this up with all the clamping than it would be if I wasn't taking it apart every time. Either way, it does such a good job that I don't really worry about it. If I have to clean it every time, no big deal.
So one thing I didn't notice about this thing when I was actually making the video is that there's these little holes right here for drilling out the screws for the hinge. I have a different way of doing it that I like better, but just in case you wanted to know, yes, you can use a little drill bit right there, and that's the perfect spot for your hinge screws.
Okay, next, there's a couple of things here. So one of the things is I did buy a hinge centering bit. This is a 7/64 make it snappy hinge centering bit. So these things are great. It just drills right into there, does a perfect job. So how do we square up these hinges though? Because we don't want them all over the place. So let's put them all over the place so you can see how easy it is to square these up. Clamps are in the way. All you do though, just go like that. And they both align perfectly. Okay, this hinge centering jig drill bit thingy. You don't have to push too far. This is another tool I wouldn't do this job without. You can do it without it. So next, just to keep it tidy, I like to vacuum these out. Again, I would have 8 holes to do, not just the 4, because I would have done both doors. And now with our number 1 Robertson bit, I'm gonna sink these guys. Now, if you are not really good with a drill, I would highly recommend you do this with a screwdriver. All it takes is one extra little click of that impact driver, or one, you know, little millimeter too far on the trigger to mess these up. And they really don't take long to screw in by hand. So if you are not very experienced with this, I would definitely recommend using a screwdriver to do this. And whenever I have apprentices doing this, I give them the screwdriver. Sorry guys, you can use the drill on your own jobs. You can use the screwdriver on my job. Some of you might think that's going to make the job take too long, but you know what takes too long? Having to reorder cabinet doors that your apprentice screwed up. That's what takes too long. So I just have to do the other door, and then I'm going to go upstairs and we'll show you guys how to fit these in, how to adjust them a little bit. Okay, we are almost ready to put these up, but what I was thinking is maybe we should acquaint ourselves with some of the moving parts on this. And another thing that I thought of is, if you haven't taken apart your kitchen yet, it might be a really good time to practice taking these on and off, so that when you get your nice new doors that you don't want to bang up, that you're already proficient with these. I'd say, you know, it can take maybe about 10 to 20 minutes to really start to get the hang of these. I remember when I was first learning how to take these on and off, it was a pretty frustrating couple of days. Like sometimes I just couldn't figure it out. So let's see if we can smooth that over a little bit. So we already talked about the latch right here. That's your ticket to getting it on and off. But the real ticket here, the real part to understand, is this little bar right here. See that little bar? That's the part that has to actually lock in and make contact before this will snap into place. So let's see where this little bar has to make contact. So the Goldilocks zone for the little bar is this little slot right here. See where my thumbnail is going into? My grubby tradesman thumbnail. It's that little slot that you need to get that bar into. So if you're struggling to actually get these things on, one of the first things is if this little set screw right here is too far out, like the way I have it right now, that's going to stop it from being able to latch properly. So that bar, when I push that screw, when I turn that screw clockwise, that bar is going to come out. So the further in, oh, sorry, it's not clockwise, it's actually counterclockwise. You'll figure it out. But basically, the further in this goes, the further out the bar is that way. And right about there should be a good place to start, just nice and flush. Okay, now's our moment of truth. So if we did a good job, this should just pop back into place because we based it off the old door. So I always start holding this thing like this with my thumb, and then I carefully place that bar in that little slot. And if you get the bar in the slot, generally should just pop back into place. So get that bar in the slot and then just push on the back. Take these off again, just like that. So it's pretty simple, like putting them back on. And then after that, it's just adjusting everything. But it's most of the way adjusted because I use the existing pattern. Another quick tip though is if you really are struggling to get the second one on, what you can do is you can play with the adjustment. So on the ones where I based it off of 3 3/4, like measuring it instead of what the actual one was from the old door. So on those ones, I had to loosen this part right here. So I would get the top one connected, and then what I would do is once those are loose, you can now push this up and down. And so with that up and down, then you're free to find where it latches, put it on, and then retighten it. And that is most of what you will need to know to be able to get these back in place. I also forgot to mention that this was number 4, and this is where number 4 door came from. So that's one of the reasons I wrote on the old cabinet doors. So now it's in place. Now it's time to do the next one. All right, let's get number 3 in place. So how it went was 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's get number 3 in place here and see how that one works out. It gets really fun when you start doing multiple hinge ones, like when it has 3 hinges. So as you can see, both times it just popped on no problem. And you know, we have to adjust all the reveals and everything. I'll explain that really quickly, but there's like a bazillion videos on YouTube about how to adjust these things because it's such a quick and easy thing to do and such an easy video to make. But really quickly, let's show what each one of the set screws does. Okay, these 2 set screws will adjust your door up and down. So loosen those and then it can slide up and then you have to retighten them. On more modern ones, you don't actually have to loosen and tighten it. You can just turn them and it moves it up and down, but these are older ones. This one will move your door in or out. So you can see this gap I've got right here. If I want to make that bigger, then I would loosen it and push it out. If I would need to make it tighter, I would loosen it and push it in and then retighten it, of course. And then this is the one that's going to adjust the reveal, the squareness of the door. Okay, so right now we have about a 1/8 gap there, down to about a 1/4 inch gap at the bottom, and you can see it's not flush there. Where'd my screwdriver go? Ah, in the cabinet. I always keep a Phillips head screwdriver in the cabinet that I'm working on. Anyways, we need to close up the bottom, so I'm just going to give this a little twist. Which way am I twisting that? I think that was the right way. I'm trying to swing it out this way on the bottom. And this one needed a lot more. Okay, and we need to adjust the height. This one is a little bit, you know, it can be really tricky getting these, you guys, because like, you know, it's always a bit of a job getting all the tops to line up and to get all the reveals straight. Sometimes you just kind of have to split the difference with stuff and then just forget about it. Anyways, I'm not gonna get too much into that. That really is one of those things where you can just like, you could spend a long time adjusting it, and if the cabinets aren't perfectly square, you'll never actually get it perfect. So, you know, fuss as much as you can handle and then let go of the rest. Because sometimes you just have to make the biggest, most obvious cabinets look perfect, and then some of the other ones can be a little bit imperfect, the reveals and all the heights and stuff, just so that you can actually live with it. And one of the other things is usually I would have some little rubber bumpers. So I haven't done that yet. I got to buy a little pack of the rubber bumpers and I put one on the bottom and top corner so that it doesn't sound like this. It has that, you know, not soft close. We don't have any soft closes on here, but it stops it from being that wood on wood sound. And as much as I want this video to be over, I think I would be negligent to not really quickly explain how to put on the handles. So the handles are pretty easy. They're just a little bolt like this that goes through the door into this thing, sandwich them tight. So all we need for that is we need a drill and a drill bit that's a little bit bigger than the bolt. You want to have at least 1 mil of slack. That way you can kind of fudge it and fine tune it if you have to. You really don't want to have much more than 1.5 mils or 2 mils of slack. I know I'm killing all you Americans with millimeters. The best way to think of it is 1 millimeter is just a little bit smaller than a 1/16. 2 mils is not 1/8. So when placing the handle, I just find where I think it looks good. And so I just kind of eyeball it. Now, I think that's in line with right about there. So there's one mark. And then where is that? It's right in the center there. Okay. So once I have it about right, I mean, you can measure it. You can do all kinds of things, right? Like you could have it be the same distance up from here as it is from here. You could do all sorts of stuff. But I'm just eyeballing it to where I think it looks good. And once I'm happy with that, that's good. And so the center is right about there. And I forgot to give myself a rough center mark right about here. I don't know exactly where it is because you also need to find your center to center spacing. So what is that? I'm just lining up the line on my tape measure exactly with the center of one of those holes. And it is a 3 3/4 distance. Okay, so let's give myself some lines, right? We know that right here is my center line. And you're only gonna have to do this once because we can make a little jig for all the rest of the handles. We got this line right here. And then exactly 3.5 away. No, 3 3/4. Let's not forget that. So that's really close to the mark I made, which was right here. 3 3/4. And I'm doing this very gently to not mark up the surface. I'm gonna double check because messing these up really sucks. What do we have? Yeah, that's 3 3/4, pretty darn close. Okay, well, there's nothing left to do but to drill this. So some people might hold a piece of wood on the back to stop blowout. I find that generally the blowout is almost always small enough for the head of the screw to cover. So just make sure you're drilling nice and square. You don't have your hand back there. We don't need holes in your hand. Okay, so let's quickly see if we did it right before we go and drill out our jig. So I'm just popping the screw through there, popping that through there. This is again another one of those, like, if you don't have good skills with the drill, use the screwdriver. If you don't have good skills with the drill, I don't know how you've gotten this far. Okay, so it's a little bit tight. Now, what are we gonna do about that? We definitely need to fix that because I can't get that bottom one in. So this is definitely something that could happen to you. We gotta ream out that bottom hole a little bit. And it's pretty easy. So I was just doing a little bit of this, and so that's gonna make the hole a tiny bit wider. You don't have a lot of wiggle room though, so don't like crank on it or you're gonna just totally mess it up and your handle's not gonna cover. I'm just trying to get about a 1/16 of an inch. Now we're going back to imperial. Get about a 1/16 of an inch so that that actually works. Let's try this again. And once we have it so that it's working, again, we will make that jig. Screwdriver, where'd you go? There you are. So little of this bolt needs to be threaded in that a screwdriver is no big deal. I'll often do this with a screwdriver without thinking about it. Okay, there we go. Okay, looks good. Straight up and down. I'm happy with that. So if you have your handle on and it looks really good, the next thing to do is to make a jig. So what am I talking about? All right, this is a really quick little handle jig. So this is something I whipped together so fast that it's not even square. What you really need to do is these pieces have to line up right here. It has to be 100% square and it has to line up perfectly on that edge and these two edges right here. So this is just a piece of laminate. You can use, laminate. You could use 1/8 or 1/4 inch hardboard. So you want something thin. You make a perfectly square L. And now what we're gonna do is, instead of like doing all the math to try and figure it out, what we're going to do is just use the holes that we made for the hardware for this one. And yeah, I didn't make this square enough to trust it for the next one, so I'm not going to. I have a specialty jig that was sent to me like 2 years ago from somebody that I'm gonna make some videos about. But anyways, I'm blabbing. So what we're going to do now is I'm just putting this right here and I'm going to the bottom of the hole because I know that's where I need it to be. What, are we going backwards? It's not wanting to drill through this. My fingers are behind there, guaranteed. Okay, so as you can see, we now have this little L with these two holes in it, and we can use this for every other handle. And so as long as your jig is perfect, this will save you so much time. If your jig isn't perfect, in fact, if it's quite messed up, this will help you mess up all of your cabinets really fast. But I never install handles on a job without a jig because like you don't want to measure and mark out every one. Anyway, so you just drill it through where those little holes are. You can use it this way and that way, which is why it has to line up so perfectly, because if they're not aligned perfectly, then the other side is not going to be perfectly in line with this one, right? It might be a little bit off or a little bit too far this way or a little bit too much up or down. So you can see the jig has to be perfect, but when it is, it works perfectly. Now there's one thing I haven't done here, and there's a Lazy Susan one right here. So I've actually never had to install the hardware on these ones. I've just done them out of a box, you know, like IKEA or something. So if I do a really good job on that one, I'll make a video about it. If I do a really bad job on that one, I'll make a video about it. So at least you guys know what mistake I made. But yeah, I'm not just gonna guaranteed film it if I have no idea what I'm talking about. Anyways, you guys, it's almost the end of my day. Let's get a quick look at these cabinets. Now I haven't done any of the reveals yet, but just generally, I mean, what an improvement, you know? Like, look at that. Boy, is that ever better than what we had here. So much better. Still have the drawers to do, that's a separate video. But yeah, that's a basic cabinet door re and re. So hopefully this helps give you the confidence to tackle that project on your own, or to know if you should hire a professional. Hopefully you're not using any of this to say what professionals should or shouldn't be doing. I'm just one guy. You know, you hired a pro, let them figure it out. As a contractor, that would be the most annoying thing in the world if people are using my videos to try and tell the contractor what to do. Guaranteed it's happened probably hundreds of times when you look at the amount of views on my videos, but yeah, hopefully that's not what's happening. I'm sure it's not in this case. Anyways, that's cabinets. I'm babbling. This video's over. I hope you guys are doing awesome. I'm getting close to wrapping up this place, so soon I'm gonna get to start working on my garage and a whole bunch of other stuff. But for now, yeah, still just chipping away at this, almost done. Yeah, I'm still talking. I gotta stop. The only way to stop is to turn the camera off. Have a good one, you guys.